Hey, Midwest Weird listeners.
Hello there.
Hello. My name is Amy Lee Lillard.
And I'm Erin Johnston.
And we are the editors, creators of Midwest Weird.
Absolutely.
And now that season 1 is done, we thought we might have a little chat.
There was some things to talk about. You know, what we define as weird. How do we pick the pieces? And we thought that might be interesting for people who enjoyed the season and also that might be looking to submit work.
Yeah. First off, thanks so much for listening to Midwest Weird.
Amazing.
There's a number of you.
Yes.
And we're happy to have you.
We're so excited.
Good to know that we're not the only weirdos out there.
Yes.
And that a lot of us like weird. And a lot of us like the Midwest.
And I love the way audiobooks have taken over, but I especially love the idea that there's still this space for audio lit. You know,
Yes.
the idea that we don't have to take in great literature only by reading. You can have a fully immersive experience. And I think that is true of all of our stories this season, that they were almost better in audio than even when we read them.
Absolutely. It all counts as reading.
It does.
We've had people ask that before. Do audiobooks count as reading? Fuck yeah, they do.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
And don't let anyone tell you different.
Don't let anyone tell you different.
Do not.
One thing you may need to know about us is we have been podcasting for a long time. Erin and myself.
We have.
We had a books podcast from 2019 to 2023. That was 4 years. Called Broads and Books. On that show, we talked about a shit ton of books. We talked about a lot of things that made us laugh. We like to laugh, Erin.
We like to laugh. We like to laugh. We're ladies who laugh.
It's a little tough right now, but we still like to laugh. We're
doing our best
to laugh. We also are doing another podcast with one of our best buds, Heath Smith. We do a podcast where we talk about 1980s and 1990s pop culture, and it is a hell of a good time.
It's a hoot.
So we have some things we could talk about that might be of interest to our listeners. I want to ask you, Erin, what do you think it is? Is it about Midwest-based writing, Midwestern writers that you particularly like, or that made you interested about this idea?
Yeah. Well, the idea solely rests on Amy's shoulders. She came to me and said, I have this idea. And I said, I love everything about that because I like the idea of, I think we all gravitate to things that we can relate to, but there's also something very specific about the Midwest that I'm not sure if you're not from here or haven't grown up here. Sometimes the nuances of the Midwest are sort of either minimized or they're not as apparent as they are to people. So I liked the idea that we were kind of going to base it on Midwest weird, Midwestern specifically. Whether that's you grew up here, used to live here, you have experience here. We didn't want to be super specific about that, but just the idea that there's a lot of weird that happens in our everyday lives just based on the places that we live. And we like to work from our own knowledge base, and this is where we are.
And when we put this call out, we really didn't know what we would find. We we provided very little direction.
So vague.
So little direction. But that was kind of the point of it, right? It's so many things can be weird, and weird means something different to everyone, and we were really excited about the idea of seeing what weird you got, what you gonna bring us.
Yes,
and we got a lot of great weird.
Which
was very, very cool.
We did,
yeah.
And I guess that kind of leads into what we were thinking when we added the word weird, or why we think that's important to this series.
Yeah, many years ago, I can't remember how many years ago, there was a print publication called Midwestern Gothic. And I really liked that because Gothic, I think, is a cousin of weird. The Gothic is very dark. It's very but the idea of Midwestern combined with that made for stuff that you'd never really read anywhere else. And what's Gothic in the Midwest might not be to people on the coasts or in other countries or whatever. And I really liked that idea that weird, like we said, means something different to everybody. It can be a badge of honor. It can be something that's thrown at you as an insult. It can be all sorts of things. But I think things that we had thought were weird were in many ways informed by what we saw in the Midwest, if that makes sense. You know, for example, just a very small example, on our podcast, Fuzzy Memories, at one point we mentioned Midwestern salads.
Yeah.
Midwestern salads are a very weird thing.
Very.
Because they have no actual salad accoutrement. They have no greenery.
No,
They have nothing that you might call a salad anywhere else.
It's like they made something and they just didn't know what to call it, so they called it salad.
Yes.
Because we're talking about marshmallows and whipped cream.
Snickers. We're talking about just straight up non-foods.
Just
put
a
into
glob
a
of
salad.
mayo.
Just disgusting.
This is a good time to mention, if you didn't already know, that Amy's vegan. So all of these Midwestern salads are absolutely
Just
horrific for her.
Horrid.
Yes.
As a kid, they weren't horrid. They were, let's get some Jell-O salad. But
Such a good example. Yes.
But to me, that always felt like, things are just strange in the Midwest. Growing up here, it felt like pop culture took a long time to get here. Mm-hmm. There was always a sense of people that live here often don't go anywhere else. It's a very insular sort of sense. So this weirdness develops from that in a lot of ways. I'm not being very clear because in a lot of ways we still don't really know what weird is. Well, it's up to everyone else,
Yeah, and I think you're kind of hitting on one of the things that I find when I think about the Midwest and I think about weird is I really think about people in the Midwest, that there is a weirdness that you think you might understand someone based on what they do for a living or where they live or how they appear, and you just never know what you're getting in the Midwest. You just really never know. You can never really pinpoint someone's political beliefs unless they're right out front with them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that kind of feeling. It's not, it's not a bubble really either way. It's more just everyone's kind of existing in a way that doesn't necessarily automatically group them into specific groups. And that I think about it in my own personal life. I think about that from a business standpoint. My husband and I own a business. We don't always fit in with business people. I'm a parent. It doesn't always track that I find other parents that are like-minded because there can be so many different, spectrums of that. And I think we were really focused on the idea that in our everyday lives, the idea of weirdness occurring, something that's maybe out of the ordinary that is hard to explain to someone else. Like, why is this phenomenon happening? Or why is this thing happening? We don't always know.
Yeah. And there's a lot of complexity that people outside the Midwest may not understand. I think, especially during political seasons, right? Like certain states may look at the Midwest as just a very uniform red. Everyone thinks the same. Everyone is the same. Whereas it's not that at all. It's a very, very strange place to be, especially if you don't fit in those, those areas.
Absolutely.
And weird can be like levels of neurodivergent. Weird can be, sexuality and gender. It can be all sorts of things. Weird can just be like someone coming up with a monster that lives in a fridge. Like there's so many different definitions. Which was part of the excitement, I think, for us. Yeah.
But it is a very hard thing to define. I mean, we've struggled with that too, but I think sounds like the most literary, ridiculous thing to say, but it's almost like you know it when you read it.
You know it when you read it.
You do. You just know. And I don't mean that to sound like porn, like you know it when you see
That's
it.
That's my first thought.
It did sound like that, but...
But same rules apply.
It's the same rules. Yeah, exactly.
But when we first put out the call, we put like a list of things in pop culture, like movies, shows, things like that we thought were just awesome and weird. Things that were unexpected, that we didn't really know what was coming. And what was great is that the people that we had in our season 1, they took that and ran with it.
They did.
And we got so many cool, unexpected explorations of weird from like very, very, very strange to just like hints of strange, like this full spectrum that was really, really cool.
It was fun, and it was in all different areas. We had strangeness within like religious sort of feeling works, and we had, strangeness in fridges, and we had, strangeness in a spam museum, and there was all these different things, and I think what we ultimately came down to is that, I guess this is getting into the process question a little bit, but we both read them, and, those were the ones that most of the time we unanimously agreed on and said, like, oh, this struck something for me immediately. It felt like you're capturing Midwest weird.
Yeah. And what was interesting is that we both sort of, maybe without even discussing it, knew what wasn't weird for us.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, like sometimes we would see things that were like just straight sci-fi. And that's great. I love sci-fi. But
Me too, yeah.
Things can be weird and sci-fi, but things that are sci-fi aren't necessarily weird, if that
Right.
makes sense.
That makes
right?
exact sense.
Same thing with like a lot of other genres, horror and things
I
like
was
that,
gonna
that we
say,
would
yeah.
get that were probably very good in that specific genre, but we weren't just seeing the weird factor
Right.
that we were looking
Yeah.
for. You know,
Just gory doesn't necessarily mean that it's weird. It
Right.
just, and it has a space for that. That's not to knock any of those works because there's a lot of great horror coming out now, especially. It feels like that
Yeah.
genre is getting really rich and there's some really interesting works in there. So we don't mean that to say to anyone that's submitting, like, we don't want those types of things.
Yeah.
We just are looking more for something different within those.
unexpected.
Unexpected
And,
is the
yeah.
best word for it. Unexpected. Exactly.
Yeah, because I think especially in some of the genre stuff, it's easy to fall into key tropes, things that
Yes.
and like we said, we ran a book podcast for a lot of years. We have read a lot, we've watched a lot. I think we're familiar with a lot of tropes. We're familiar with a lot of different things. And so when we find something unexpected, it's even more exciting. It's even more just like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I didn't know you could do that. 36 hours in a spam museum? Yes.
I mean, who knew that this cool? I mean, we looked it up online, the Spam Museum. It is amazing. Like, who knew? And that's a very Midwestern thing to have a Spam Museum off this, quintessential highway that you have to
Yeah.
travel. It's things like that took us by surprise.
Yeah, that's a
and-
great way of saying it.
But
Yeah.
also fit. Like it took you by surprise, but you're like, oh, that also tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm a writer, you're a writer. I've submitted so much over the years. I know that when editors say, like, we know it when we see it, that isn't very helpful.
No,
a lot
it's
of times.
not, no.
Understand that completely.
Yeah.
And so we knew coming into this discussion that we wanted to provide a little bit of things to hang your hat on, like the
Yeah.
unexpected, the surprises, that kind of stuff. And knowing that more often than not, we don't know what we're looking for, so we're happy to kind of check out what comes our way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you're not going to get a full on critique back from us. Like
No,
we're just
no.
going to say it might not fit our purposes, but that doesn't mean you should stop writing. It doesn't mean you shouldn't
No.
submit it somewhere else. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means for our specific. That's what we say when we say we know it when we see it.
Absolutely.
Because there were stories we really loved that just
Yeah.
didn't fit exactly what we were going for.
Yeah, they weren't just the weird, or in some ways, and maybe this gets into one of our questions too. Obviously, there is a sound component to our episodes,
Yes.
and that was something that when I came up with Midwest Weird, and also just back note, I think several years ago, I just had this phrase of Midwest Weird come to me. I didn't know what it was, and for a couple years, I didn't know what to do with it. It was only as we got more into the world of podcasting, as I put together a fiction podcast, and I really started getting excited about the use of sound with various stories, that I thought this could be a great way of doing that. So one thing that we look for when we're looking at different stories that are submitted to is, would this work in a cool way with audio? Would this work with, some music, with some sound effects? Like, what is there a cool way that, I particularly can see we could make this come to life in an audio way?
Yeah. And that's a really good point, because there were some that we liked or listen, there's one genre I have a lot of respect for, and that's short fiction, because I don't know how to condense myself ever.
Nope.
And there were some amazing short fiction pieces that we got that were doing some really cool things. We just
Yeah.
couldn't figure out how it translated to audio. So that's an example of our form being a little different than a print form, in that we have to think of it in two ways. Is the substance that we're looking for there, but also is this going to translate to a almost purely, listener standpoint. So
So it's tricky in that way, and it's also, I think that's one of the things I really like about our project, and I think one of the things some of our listeners are responding to is that audio component. And like we said, we both review the stories that come our way, and we both have to agree on if we think it's good going forward. And then from that point, after we, just thinking about process, after we talk with the author and ask, if they're still in and all that good stuff, then there's a process we follow by which we ask the author, would you like to read the story, or would you like one of our team members to read the story? And either one, as you could see in season 1, is totally workable.
yeah.
And then once we get that recording or make that recording, then it's my turn to look at a whole bunch of music samples, try and figure out like what kind of mood we're trying to convey, what kind of like movement I want through the story. It's a very, very subjective process, and it's just sort of like, it's a lot of fun to try and put that puzzle together and come up with something that we think works. There's sometimes I make myself laugh, or sometimes that I make myself think, oh, that's right.
That is perfect.
And that's, part of the fun of it. And we hope then that our authors enjoy, the accompaniment that's gone with it. And we've heard some good things. So
yeah, absolutely. And to be clear, that part of the process that's 100% Amy, because she owns all the producer credits on this thing, because I do not have any of that ability or skill or anything. I get to listen to it and review it and say that's amazing, or whatever else. And there's usually no notes, because she puts the stuff exactly where I would too. So everything comes together kind of in that sound component.
I want to see, Erin, we had 13 episodes in season 1.
Wow.
Including an episode by you,
yeah,
including an episode by me, including an episode by our dear friend Heath Smith.
Yes.
Curious, what some of your favorites are from season 1.
Oh, gosh. I really liked 36 Hours in the Spam Museum. That one really, it's kind of a cliche phrase, but took my breath away when I read it the first time, because I was so engrossed. And that's a special reading experience from an editor point of view. When you read something, you get lost in it and you kind of forget that you're supposed to be reading it to see if this works or not. That's usually a first sign to me that there's something here with this story if I get lost in it. I really enjoyed Red Velvet. That one was really... There was something silky about the use of words in that one.
Yeah, the language was
amazing. So I loved Destroying Angels.
Yeah.
That was an interesting piece. That was, to me, a perfect example of something that was Midwest weird.
And it was quiet. It was very quietly weird, and almost a sense of like building dread or something that we couldn't quite put our finger. Yeah, very eerie. Good call.
I think because they were mushroom hunting too, it almost had this damp feeling to it, which is a weird thing to say about a piece of writing, but that was a really interesting piece to me, and I loved the way the audio turned out. You've mentioned, and I know it was one of your favorites, Growth, which was the thing, which brings me to my other one, Negation.
Yeah.
I adore that piece of writing. Like I said, I got blown away by flash fiction in this whole process, and that piece I can still hear the voice. I can hear the lines. I just loved that.
One thing that I really loved and was surprised by was one of our only nonfiction pieces, Drug Test by Sam Sharp.
That was so
which
good.
Which was so freaking cool. It was framed as the drug test that just got super weird and weird and weird. Weirder and weirder and weirder. But it felt so like... That's an excellent example of like personal story, but yet one that resonates so deeply in the Midwest.
Yes.
I was really blown away by the structure of that. You and I are both suckers for interesting structures when it comes to different stories.
Perfect example too of being able to take an interesting structure and move it to audio. So, when we said earlier it might not work for audio, we don't want to scare anyone away and say that we're not. I mean, like you just said, we love weird structure. And I loved the way the audio turned out. It was really well done, and that piece was funny, but also just kind of hit you.
It really did, and again, very short or shortish, but really powerful in that. It's interesting. We've said that when we read, we have to agree on it, and there's been times where I've had a strong feeling about something and tried to kind of convince you, and you've had a strong feeling. One that you had a strong feeling about from the start was We Knew a World, by J.P. Solheim, which, as I was working on it audio-wise, I just fell more and more in love with it, because when it comes down to it, religion is so fucking weird. And the way that people, attach themselves to it and let it attach to them. And it was such a powerful story. And one of my favorites over the season too.
Yeah, that was the audio on that was beautifully done.
Also, our very first one, The Highway. Oh, Maxine Firehammer's voice.
We talked about that for weeks.
We want her to read everything for us.
We almost tried to convince her to record just a series of stories we could listen to for sleep. Exactly. Because it was so calming.
You are now our voice for everything.
Yes, absolutely.
We talked a little bit about this. Obviously the point of this discussion is to give a little bit of behind the scenes and to how we put this together, but also for people who might be interested in being part of Midwest Weird in the future, because we are accepting stories for season 2, for season 3. What do you think submitters should think about as they look at their own work, as they think about being part of Midwest Weird?
I think this is probably going to sound like bad writing advice, but I think the stories that maybe didn't work for us were forced. Like maybe they were forcing the weird in. And I think that what we're looking for is more of a inherent weirdness. You know, it's just part of it. You mentioned that we have stories in it. My piece is also nonfiction.
Which I was going to mention at the end as a perfect example of everyday weirdness.
Yes.
As just, you got sucked into an in-home party and there were just weird people everywhere that you could not escape.
Yeah.
And it's the absurdity of the everyday.
Absolutely.
And the weird was baked in. Like
yes. And I tend to write more humorous.
Yeah.
So the great thing for submitters now is that there's a whole season of work to look at.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can see how all these different types of weird that we're looking for and accepted, and you can see where you might fit in there and maybe even get some ideas from that. One thing that we are clear to mention too in our submission is we're looking for people that, your voice may not have been heard, whether you're a first-time writer, whether you're, a seasoned writer, no matter your age, no matter where you are, we're just asking that you be based in or have a history in the Midwest and that you write weird.
Yeah,
and
that's it. Yeah. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't know if you do this too, but my personal process is that when we get a submission, there's a bio there and I don't even read it before I read the piece because I don't want any information prior to in terms of informing where I think they're going to go with the Midwest Weird.
That's interesting. I do the opposite.
Really?
I look at the bio. Yeah. And I don't know why, if I just want to maybe envision a voice or something.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
To me, it sort of adds to the story in a way.
Yeah. And see, I don't read it till the end. Yeah. And then
look at us.
Yeah.
Coming at it from different, and still coming up with magic.
Still
magic.
Create
together.
Magic. Yeah. Just nailing it. No, if we can say so ourselves, we're feeling good about season 1. Okay? We're feeling it.
I'm very proud of season 1.
And you know what? In this world, we deserve to be proud about something.
We deserve to be happy.
We
and
do.
To feel some joy. You know what was sad is that when our last episodes aired on October 30th, I think I was so stressed out about the upcoming election. I didn't even allow myself to feel like we fucking did this.
Yes.
We put out a whole season.
We did.
We started a magazine.
We did. And it had great response. And we're so thankful to everyone that submitted and went through the process with us. We're so excited for the other seasons and what's going to come into our inbox. It's very fun. And
a few other tidbits for those, whether you're a writer or whether you're just listening to the show. If you haven't already, I invite you to go to MidwestWeird.com. And at MidwestWeird.com, obviously there's sections that are about us and are about how to submit. There's also a section that we've called Laugh. When you look at that section, you will find 9 to 10, I can't remember how many, I think 9, columns from our dear friend Heath Smith.
amazing.
He's called his column Donserly Light. You'll see why when you look at the thing. Each of his columns are about some aspect of pop culture that he finds so delightfully weird.
Yes.
Other than that, as we've said before, we gave him no direction whatsoever.
None. Not a single piece of direction.
We have known Heath for a long time. As we said, he's one of our co-hosts on Fuzzy Memories. He is an inherently weird and funny individual. We love him so much.
Yes.
And when we started this magazine, we knew he needed to be part of it somehow. So we asked him, hey, do you want to write like a column or a recap? And that was it. And then he gave us Genius.
He submitted 3 immediately, and I haven't laughed that hard in... It had been a while. Let me just say that.
And if you've caught up on all the episodes, he did one of our final episodes called Space Aliens, where you hear his voice, you hear his delivery. It's everything you could imagine and more, but there's so much more at the website. And when you sign up at MidwestWeird.com to get emails, then every other week you get a new one.
Yeah.
Straight to your inbox.
And on a bonus with that, if you sign up and you get the newsletter that has the column, you get book recs or show recs from us.
Do.
You get a little tidbit in your inbox that say, hey, we liked this, you might too.
Little tidbits.
Yeah. Joyous tidbits.
Joyous, weird tidbits.
Yeah.
That should be the name of something. Maybe...
That should be the name of the newsletter. Joyous, weird tidbits.
Which is better than in Fuzzy Memories, we decided to name the Weird Bullshit Roundup. going every
obsessed.
week. Yeah,
Obsessed,
that's
yeah.
pretty new. We mentioned that you had done one of the last episodes, In Home Party, delightful. I also did one of them, and they're from one of my books. And I just want to mention that I have a couple books out.
Yes.
And that story was from a book called Exile in Guyville.
I mean, a couple or three?
Three.
Yeah.
Three.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Thank
just
you
want
for
to
the
be clear
clarification.
that it's 3.
As we said, we're from the Midwest, and we downplay our own
Yeah, we
accomplishments.
downplay. That was a very Midwestern thing to do. To say, I have a couple of books out.
I felt weird even saying, I should probably mention my books, but I feel weird saying
I knew it.
Yeah.
I could tell by your face. She's like, I have to do this, and I don't feel comfortable. So let me finish. She's got 3 books out. 2 are short story collections. 1 is memoir. All are fantastic. If there is any part of you that is looking for even a touch of weird or a little bit of
Sprinkling of
sprinkling of weird.
I don't know if I like that. But
Yeah, I don't either because it's just
I
full
don't
on
like
weird.
It is.
I don't,
You're right. You're right.
Yeah,
There's no sprinkling.
sprinkling.
Yeah.
If you liked this season, then these books are basically made for you. And even if you liked a couple of the episodes, these books are made for you. And we highly recommend the short story collections. Dig Me Out and
Exile in Guyville.
I was trying to say Guy in Exileville.
That works too.
Exile in Guyville. And then her memoir, A Grotesque Animal.
That's right.
All are fantastic. All are available anywhere that you get books. And we highly, highly recommend as a show, as Broads and Books Productions, we recommend them. They're fantastic. I've read all of them. I'm speaking not just as a friend and co-producer, co-creator. Don't produce
And
anything.
my self-appointed bodyguard.
Oh
for
yeah, I am.
all
I am in charge
book-related-
of crowds at
Yeah.
book-related events. So don't come at us weird at those things. We like weird, but not right up in our business.
Not right
so,
up in our faces.
No, I will shut you down
We like
immediately.
weird from a distance.
Yeah, I like to watch weird. I don't need it up.
I don't
in my,
need it. I don't want it up
in my bubble.
Don't break my bubble with your weirdness.
No,
Don't do it.
In fact, that is one thing I've added to my arsenal is like tape, and I'm going to create a bubble. And
okay.
Like so, there's a physical representation
I
of where you can
like
be
it.
and where you can't be.
So like on every outfit, you're just gonna put like a
Wow,
bubble?
I was going more with the table, but if you want it on the outfit, we can do that too.
I thought you were saying going forward in life, you were putting
no.
tape around yourself.
No, I like that.
Which
though.
I like it. Yeah.
I mean, maybe.
Because
Maybe.
you have weird people coming up to you all the time.
All the time.
This could help.
It could help.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, that's true.
If I did that, people wouldn't touch my tattoos anymore. That would be cool.
That would be a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
That's another Midwest weird thing, right? We just feel like we can touch other people's tattoos for
Apparently.
no reason.
It's gross.
I'm pregnant bellies.
Oh.
Don't do that.
No, don't do that.
well, now this is-
that applies everywhere. We've gone off on it. We've lost the thread.
We've lost the thread.
The
We're
thread
sorry. Back
is
to the...
the thread is that Erin and I co-created Midwest Weird. We are happy to provide it to you. We're very excited about this first season of Midwest Weird. So glad you could join us. So glad that you were excited by what you heard. And we've got more seasons coming, and we're very excited to. Well, I keep saying excited. We are
elated. We're so good with synonyms too, guys. So good.
walking thesaurus.
Yes.
Anyway, please send us your work if you're interested in being part of it.
Yeah.
And we'll talk to you soon. We'll be back in February with more weird stories. If you like what you hear, subscribe, like, and review the show. And if you want your fiction or nonfiction to appear on Midwest Weird, send us your work. Read the show notes for a submission link. Thanks for joining us, and stay weird.